The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is directed by Francis Lawrence and tells a story about a young President Snow who is assigned to take care of one of the contestants of the Hunger Games and slowly but surely forms a relationship with this contestant, and it leads to a lot of drama behind the scenes of the Hunger Games and in the Hunger Games itself. I enjoyed the Hunger Games franchise. The first two movies I really enjoyed a whole lot, especially Catching Fire, which is probably my favorite of the Hunger Games films, and to many people it is the best of the Hunger Games films. The last two, Mockingjay Part 1 and 2, are fine conclusions in my opinion, but they do feel dragged out and unnecessarily split into two parts, and it could have been just one movie and it would have been fine and a perfect trilogy, you know? But it was the trend back in Hollywood at the time, so I guess the more money the merrier, you know? So after all these years, they decided to make a prequel talking about the life of President Snow before he became the president of Pan Am. And what are my thoughts on this prequel? Well, let's start off with the positives. I like the performances from most of the cast, if not all. Rachel Zegler does a fine enough job in her performance here as the new contestant, and despite me not liking her in real life all that much, she is a great singer and does well with a lot of her singing moments, though it does get a bit repetitive at times. I feel like in terms of her character, seemed to be the only thing going for her, especially in the third act. As for the actor who plays President Snow here, he does a really good job. He is magnificent in this role, and I would love to see more of this guy going forward in Hollywood and doing more projects. And I really hope that despite the box office performance of this film as of today, he's still able to work more in Hollywood, because I found his performance here to be really interesting and lines up perfectly with what we see in the future with the old President Snow. And I just really liked what he was able to do with the character here, and he gives enough vulnerability, shows enough anger to have us at least understand how he got to the way he is in the Hunger Games movies with Jennifer Lawrence. As with Peter Dinklage and Viola Davis, these two characters and these performances are really good here, and they do well enough in their roles, especially Viola Davis, who is really creepy and unsettling. Yeah, that's about it. That's all the positives I have, is that the performances are really good. I think after sitting on this movie for enough time to pass on, because I saw this like a couple of days ago, I think the only thing that I actually took away from this film that connected with me are the performances. The cinematography is fine, but there's too many wide angles and wide lenses being used, especially outside of the Hunger Games arena. At times the cinematography does look cool, but for the most part it feels like the whole movie is being stretched unnecessarily, and I feel like the movie could have been done a little bit better if there were more close-up angles that are more surface level, more grounded, and get us more personal with the characters instead of having every scene feel like a wide shot. Like, it was overdone in my opinion. It made the film look too stretched out and way too grand for its own good. I would have liked it if the film would have been more personal, as these are like the early beginnings of the Hunger Games, so having it feel a little bit more claustrophobic would have been better. As for the story and structure of the film, this is my biggest problem with the movie. It feels like two different movies are competing with one another. In the first two parts of this film, which the movie is split into three parts, are like about President Snow and him training Rachel Zegler's character to compete in the Hunger Games, and then the later half is a completely different movie. The third part is basically a love story between these two characters, and it doesn't feel like there is enough time spent on these characters in that part to form the relationship they have. Yes, you got the Hunger Games going on, but there wasn't even enough there to build up a relationship. They were just trying to focus on the games themselves. And then all of a sudden we get to a full-on romance movie, and it just felt like two completely different movies competing with one another. Sure, plot points from the first two parts go into the third part, but it still felt like a rushed job. Not enough time was spent on these moments and these two plot lines for me to connect with these characters in their moments and in these separate stories. And I found myself really apathetic to a lot of the emotional moments going on here in this film. Nothing in this film got me to attach to the characters in the way they're written. It felt way too rushed, despite this movie having a pretty slow pace. And that's due to a lot of scenes actually taking time with the characters. But in terms of scene progression and story progression, the movie and the writing just felt way too rushed, and the movie could have been better if it was like split into two parts. Why they chose to split one book, like the Hunger Games Mockingjay, into two parts, I don't understand. They should have done that with this movie. The structure of this film and the story is a big issue for me. The characters I found really uninteresting despite the performances being really good. The music is not all that special. I didn't really find myself humming to a lot of the new themes that the soundtrack had going for it. The cinematography is way too stylistic and too distracting at times. All in all, I found this movie to be really unsatisfying and an unnecessary addition to the Hunger Games franchise, and is probably my least favorite Hunger Games film. I don't think it's a terrible abomination, but definitely a massive disappointment. I'm going to give the Hunger Games, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, a D+. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you guys next time.